Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, in breaking news, stunning news overnight, Congressman Chuck Edwards, the Republican in North Carolina's 11th congressional district, has announced he's dropping out of the race after a House Ethics Committee report. We'll have all the breaking details coming up. And a good Wednesday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the program with you 24/7 on demand in your favorite podcast app. It's real simple. Just search for the Nick Craig Show, tap the subscribe or follow button, and listen to a new program each and every weekday morning. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning, as always, brought to you by Melissa Gott and the team over at the Law Group here in Wilmington. For any legal questions, challenges, or concerns, lawgroupnc.com. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on. We always appreciate their continued support here of the Nick Craig Show. Wow. Stunning developments very early this morning as Congressman Chuck Edwards, we talked about him in great detail yesterday here on the Nick Craig Show, has announced that he is dropping out of the race, dropping out his bid for re-election in North Carolina's 11th congressional district. This comes on the heels of a very damaging report from the United States House Ethics Committee. The most interesting thing about it, he posted it on social media at 3:30 this morning. The official time on X, 3:32 a.m. on August the 5th. The post reads as follows: after much prayer and reflection, I've decided to withdraw from my re-election campaign. I will complete my current term. Serving Western North Carolina has been the honor of my life. Thank you for your trust, prayers, and support. God bless Western North Carolina and America. This was seemingly the way that this would play out after some of the detail we covered yesterday. We'll get into some of it here on the program today. If you missed yesterday's show, as always, encourage you to check out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. There is a video version of the program that is available on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook as well. We went through all the details on this 25-page House Ethics Committee report detailing the very inappropriate relationship that Chuck Edwards had with young female staffers in his office. Those details included lavish vacations, gifts, skipping votes as a member of the United States House, skipping those votes so that he could decorate a Christmas tree at one of his staffers' houses. Very inappropriate. There's really no better way to describe it. Inappropriate text messages, again, with young female staffers in his office. All of that coming out in the House Ethics Committee report that was released midday or early afternoon, I think it was, on Monday. And fast forward to 3:30 a.m. Wednesday morning, this post from Congressman Edwards announcing that he is not going to resign his seat. He will remain serving in Congress until the end of the calendar year, but is no longer going to seek re-election. As you can imagine, this creates a big problem for Republicans in the 11th congressional district, which encompasses the vast majority of Western North Carolina. There's, I think, 16 counties that make up the 11th congressional district, all of them centered in, or not centered, but all of them in the western half of the state, leading right up to the Tennessee and northern Georgia border, right there at the far western tip of the state of North Carolina. This is now a major problem that has to be dealt with. Early voting begins in North Carolina on October the 15th. Election day is November the 3rd. We are less than 100 days away from the election, and at this point, we're less than 70 days, or at 70 days away from the start of early voting. 70 days from when voters, or until voters will have the opportunity to vote in this election. And there's even a sooner deadline for those that serve in the United States or any sort of United States military and are serving overseas, or U.S. citizens, North Carolina residents who live overseas that have the ability to vote in elections, those individuals get ballots as early as September the 4th. We are less than a month away from individuals, now albeit a small number of individuals. Nevertheless, we are less than a month away from individuals casting ballots in these midterm elections, casting their vote for who they want to represent them, in this case, in the United States House in Western North Carolina. Now, the report came out on Monday. We knew about the report beforehand, and so it is possible, presumably, that there has already been some high-level discussions. And let me be clear with what I'm saying. I don't have any inside information here. I'm not wink, wink, nod, nod. Oh, I've heard this. No, I'm just straight pontificating on what exactly is going on here. There's possibility that with the idea that this report existed, we knew that this ethics investigation was going on. Axios broke this back in May that this was being investigated. You would presume and you would hope with the potential looming report that some high-level conversations have begun taking place. Not that people were ready to go necessarily. This is all unfolding really in about a 36-hour window from when the ethics report was released Monday afternoon, that these conversations had started and had begun taking place, because there's no time. This is going to be a very quick turnaround here in the state of North Carolina. To walk you through some of the detail, at least as I understand it right now, how this process will play out. We just saw a situation unfold a couple of weeks ago where Senator Lindsey Graham unexpectedly passed away in South Carolina. There is now a second primary or a special election that is taking place in South Carolina today, where voters will have the opportunity to vote in that contest and choose his replacement. That is not the case in North Carolina. There will not be a special election. There will not be a special vote that takes place. There's just, frankly, not enough time for that to happen, and state law prescribes the process pretty clearly. It will be the 11th Congressional District Republican Executive Committee. Of those, I believe it's 16 counties in Western North Carolina that make up the 11th Congressional District. It will be that executive committee, those members of the GOP, that will determine who their next candidate will be. And that will, the individual that comes out of that vote, it will be a vote by the 11th Congressional District, not too dissimilar to what we saw in the state of Maine, right? We covered the Graham Plattner situation in pretty great detail here on the Nick Craig Show. That process played out a way in which voters did not get their choice to choose their replacement there. It was the Democrat Party of Maine. It was their executive committee that got to vote and got to decide and got to pick their replacement. Every state handles it a little bit differently. There are different timelines that are prescribed as it relates to when something like a second primary or second election could take place. Some states, as I already mentioned, like South Carolina, handle it one way. Other states like North Carolina and Maine handle it a different way. It's very just dependent on what the general statute, what the state law prescribes in each of those states surrounding elections. So it will be the 11th Congressional District Republican Executive Committee that will select the replacement for Edwards, and it will be that individual that faces off against Democrat Jamie Ager, who is as I just mentioned there, the Democrat candidate running in this contest. It will be that individual who faces off with a very short timeline, a very short time frame. Early voting starts October the 15th. Military and overseas ballots go out as early as September the 4th. That is how quickly this process is set to unfold. We are staring right down the barrel at election season. We are sub 100 days from Election Day itself. This is an absolute disaster for Republicans, not only just in Western North Carolina, I would argue across the rest of the state and even at the national level, as we talked about on the program yesterday. Republicans trying to do everything that they can to maybe hold on to a 1 or 2 vote majority in the United States House after the midterm elections are said and done. And with the turmoil now in North Carolina's 11th congressional district, those odds become ever slimmer. And that is the reality of this situation that is unfolding in front of our very eyes here this morning. Continuing with coverage of breaking political news very early Wednesday morning around 3:30, Congressman Chuck Edwards, the Republican member of Congress from North Carolina's 11th congressional district, which consumes most of Western North Carolina, announcing on social media that he is not going to be seeking re-election coming up in November. He had a primary election in March, won that pretty handedly, and was set to be the Republican incumbent candidate running in the race taking place here in early November. A very damaging House Ethics Committee report released earlier in the week, Monday afternoon, showed very disturbing details in which the congressman and Chuck Edwards was acting what can only be described as very inappropriately with members of his staff. The situation only is worse when you learn that the two members, what are known as Staffer 1 and Staffer 2 in the 25-page House Ethics report, one of them as young as 19 years old, both of them being young female staffers working within his office, paying for them to go on luxury trips out to the Bellagio in Las Vegas, New York City, private, intimate one-on-one dinners, jewelry, handbags, clothes, complimenting their appearance consistently, sending very awkward and uncomfortable text messages about appreciating his time with them so much and some of his greatest accomplishments. Just some very cringy, creepy, disturbing stuff from a 60-year-old married man serving in the United States Congress as a member of the United States House who was acting this way with young female staffers in his office. Now, it is important to note, and we covered this in detail on yesterday's program, this report, this House Ethics Committee report, provides no evidence and says very clearly that Chuck Edwards did not have any sort of sexual activity or sexual relations with these two young staffers in his office, but he, for all intents and purposes, and you can read through the report yourself, it is publicly available, publicly published by the United States House and their Ethics Committee. He walked it right up to the line with some of the things that he was saying, some of the messages that he was sending, the actions and the things that he was doing, as I've mentioned, skipping votes on the floor of the United States House so that he could be at one of his staffers' homes decorating their Christmas tree, walking it, literally tightroping it right up to the line to the point of things turning sexual in nature. It is a damning report. None of it reads well for the congressman. None of it paints a pretty picture with what has gone on here over the last couple of years in Congress. Very creepy, very bizarre, very weird. And the question was, what happens now? We knew this report was pending. Axios broke the news back in May. We had a suspicion, had a feeling that something like this could come out, could be available. It's here. The report is out. It is not a pretty picture. The House Ethics Committee suggested and recommended a full censure of Congressman Edwards from the full body of the United States House. The whole thing, just a mess. The whole thing, a total disaster for Chuck Edwards and for Republicans. And so this is something that is obviously breaking, something that is very fluid, and something that is going to have to be resolved very quickly. It will be the executive committee of the 11th District Republican Party, because Edwards was in fact a registered Republican, or is a registered Republican, that will have the opportunity to announce his replacement. But boy, is this going to be an uphill battle. We're just 70 some odd days away from early voting beginning in North Carolina. We're less than 100 days away from Election Day, and you are going to be talking about introducing a brand new candidate to voters in Western North Carolina with that short of a time frame. Not to draw a direct comparison, obviously a lot of the details are very different, but you look at what happened in 2024 after a disastrous debate performance for Joe Biden in July of 2024 leading up to the general election. He decides then, it was about a week or so later, that he is going to drop out of the race, not too dissimilar of a time frame we're in right now, that he's going to drop out of the race and Kamala Harris becomes the nominee. One of the there's obviously a lot of reasons why Kamala Harris lost. A, she's a terrible candidate and so on and so forth. Her policies and ideas sucked. But a large part of it was the fact she had less than 100 days to run a campaign. Now, fortunately for her, she was already the sitting vice president. She had some level of name ID. The establishment of, the political party was all behind her. So she had the ability to fundraise and move money around very quickly. But that's the situation that's essentially unfolding now in Western North Carolina, albeit at a much smaller scale, albeit with a much different level of controversy. But that's what's happening. You've got a ridiculously short time frame between now and the start of early voting, now and Election Day, where an individual is going to have to essentially introduce themselves to hundreds of thousands of voters in Western North Carolina and convince them that they are the best candidate, they are the best man or woman for the job. That's the quick turnaround that we're looking at right now. And so the question is, who comes forward? And I will note that there is no official information on this, that none of the individuals that I'm going to name have announced, at least publicly, or made anything public that they are jumping into this race, but it's likely to be members of the North Carolina General Assembly. And the individual that seemingly is most poised to run in this and be the heir apparent, be the replacement, would be Tim Moffitt, who is currently a member of the North Carolina General Assembly. Why does he jump out in this? Well, his district overlaps most significantly with the 11th Congressional District in Western North Carolina. He does have some pretty strong name ID in his district. Of course, his district is not 16 counties, which encompasses the 11th Congressional District, but he is an individual that's got strong name ID, that has been a very effective member of the North Carolina General Assembly. Just throwing this out there as what exactly is going to happen here with this quick turnaround. Somebody like him jumps to the front of the race. Now, there is another individual by the name of Adam Smith who ran against Chuck Edwards in the primary. Obviously, you could make the case that he was the runner-up in that contest and deserves some level of consideration from Republicans in the 11th Congressional District out in Western North Carolina. However, the executive committee is not obviously required to choose him, but he did just run a campaign in the western half of the state in the primary that happened in March. So from my vantage point, those are probably your two frontrunners. Adam Smith and Representative Tim Moffitt are probably the two individuals. If you were going to say, what is our best shot here? Who gives us the best odds to win this very contentious seat, this very contentious race? Those two individuals are probably the first two that come to my mind based on a variety of different factors. This is going to be absolutely freaking fascinating to watch. The information, the details that we are likely to find out, I would say in the coming days. I don't even know that it will take that long. I mean, there's a real possibility that later on today, for those that are joining us live this morning, 7:20 here on this Wednesday morning, there is a possibility that by early afternoon or into the mid-evening hours that somebody announces that they are coming forward and running in this contest. You could have multiple people that jump through here, and it's just going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. It is not very often that we have such an interesting story as breaking news this early in the morning with so many details that are unknown, but that's exactly the situation that we're in. When I woke up and saw the post a little after 4 o'clock this morning, it had just 4,000 views. The post had just 4,000 views on X in that period of time. Over the last couple of hours, that post has now jumped to more than 200,000 views. So this is all new, all dynamic. We're keeping an eye on all of the details. Make sure you follow me over on social media, Twitter or X and Facebook. Make sure you follow me over there. I'll be watching this throughout the day. It's going to be a fascinating one to watch, and we'll of course keep an eye on all of those details. All right, I want to thank the law group here in Wilmington for their continued support of the program and remind you that when legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the law group right here in Wilmington. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of our state, no matter the issue that you're facing. Maybe it's a divorce, a real estate transaction, a position where you need a strong criminal defense. No matter the problem, the law group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, folks. They're not some big national law firm with a branch or an office here in North Carolina. No, Melissa Gott and her team live right here in southeastern North Carolina, live right here in Wilmington. Their office is located downtown, and they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or online lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group and their continued support here of the Nick Craig Show. All right, quick break. More on this disaster of a situation with Congressman Chuck Edwards coming up as the Nick Craig Show continues. Streaming live this morning, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Wednesday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show, highlighting and covering some breaking news out of Western North Carolina today. In a very early social media post this morning, Congressman Chuck Edwards announcing that he is not going to be seeking re-election, coming less than 36 hours after a very damning House Ethics Committee report indicating and highlighting some very inappropriate activity with young female staffers within his office in Washington, D.C. Edwards has served there since 2024. He served in 2023. He served in the North Carolina General Assembly prior to that from 2016 to 2023, serving his first term in Congress, 2024, up until the end of 2026, and obviously was seeking re-election, ran in a primary in March of this year, won that primary very handedly, and now was seeking re-election. Obviously, that is not going to happen with the new information that has come to light over the last day and a half or so, putting the National Republican Party in a miserable spot moving forward in a very contentious seat out in Western North Carolina, which is interesting, because this has been an area of the state that has been dealt with a lot of recent controversy. Prior to Chuck Edwards serving in this position, in this seat in Western North Carolina, well, who was there before? You'll remember a name, Representative Madison Cawthorn, who was scandal-ridden himself. Cawthorn went through a variety of different scandals and problems when he was serving in that position in Western North Carolina, an ethics investigation with him, questions about insider trading. Multiple times he brought loaded handguns into airports. One of the airports, I believe, was in Asheville. The other went through Charlotte Douglas International Airport with a loaded handgun as a member of Congress. All of that forcing him to drop out of the, decide that he was not going to be running for re-election out in Western North Carolina, essentially being boxed out of that seat because of his incredibly stupid actions. I mean, how incompetent do you have to be as a sitting member of Congress to have a loaded handgun in your bag as you're going through security at the airport, going through TSA, a loaded handgun? I mean, most people are worried, oh, is my shampoo over a certain number of ounces? Are they going to steal that? Others are going through airport security with loaded handguns. I mean, totally unconscionable when you look at the situation as a member of Congress. A bunch of other things unfolding behind the scenes with former Representative Cawthorn. Some weird videos published that were made available showing pretty disturbing actions with other people, a variety of different issues. All of this to be said, the last two Republican members of Congress serving in North Carolina 11, dealing with major scandals, major issues, Cawthorn and Edwards. And then, of course, you look at some of the stuff even before that with Mark Meadows, who was in that or served in. Now, to be fair, the districts have changed pretty dramatically since that period of time, but Cawthorn and Edwards, no question about it, major controversies, major issues. So how do we go forward with this? As I've already mentioned, it will be the executive committee of the GOP out in the 11th Congressional District, which includes 16 counties out in Western North Carolina. It will be them. That will be that group that determines and will get to decide who the replacement is. And that's what's going to be so interesting. And of course, this very compressed timeline. We are staring down the barrel at Election Day. Early voting begins October the 15th. Military and overseas ballots go out in about a month. That's how quickly all of this stuff is set to happen. That is the very short timeline that is set to take place in Western North Carolina. All of this, while there is a very serious Democrat challenger. The western half of the state, no surprise, is a pretty strong Republican area, and it has been now for quite some time. And it has traditionally been a seat that Republicans do pretty well in. When you go back and look at some of the recent elections that have taken place out in Western North Carolina, these are elections that, for the most part, Republicans win pretty handily. When you look at the general election that took place back in 2024, it was Chuck Edwards against an individual by the name of Caleb Rudow. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his name. Edwards, 56% of the vote. The Democrat challenger, 43%. I mean, that's a pretty solid election victory. He won that race by 245,000 votes, plus for Edwards, 186,000 votes for the Democrat in that race. That's a pretty sizable election victory. I mean, that's not a quote-unquote close race by any stretch of the imagination. You're looking at a margin of, 13 percentage points or 12.5 percentage points between the Republican and Democrat. That is what many in political circles, for those that follow politics closely and keep an eye on this stuff, that is what you would call a quote-unquote safe district. That is an area where, for the most part, as long as there is a common sense individual on the ballot that has an R next to their name, they should win that pretty squarely, pretty handedly. We covered on the program yesterday some of the national political groups that rank these congressional districts and determine not necessarily what the outcome is or what the outcome is going to be, but they look at the entirety of the race and try and determine, how is this thing going to play out? Previously, North Carolina's 11th congressional district, what was described as a safe Republican district. And traditionally, in many of these surveys, you have safe Republican, lean Republican, toss-up. Then you have likely or lean Democrat and safe Democrat. It's a spectrum to Democrat, Republican, and then kind of this toss-up in the middle. The North Carolina 11th congressional district, since May, has gone from likely Republican, meaning in all likelihood the Republican wins, to a toss-up. And that is in large part due to the fact that the Democrat challenger here in Jamie Agar has been doing very well out in Western North Carolina. He has raised a lot of money. We have seen a contest out there where the fundraising numbers are incredibly lopsided. Agar has raised a boatload of cash out in Western North Carolina. He is a farmer from the area, from the western half of the state, has done a pretty good job at getting his name out there. As I mentioned, has fundraised very well and is essentially trying to reignite or bring back what you would call a blue dog Democrat. This guy, now I can't promise you how he's going to act if he wins, but he does not profess and proclaim to be some radical left-wing socialist progressive. He's not. He is a more salt of the earth, down in the dirt kind of Democrat candidate. Literally, he's a literal farmer out in Western North Carolina, trying to rekindle the Democrat Party that controlled North Carolina for the better part of a century. Right? It's important to remember that, important to note, prior to the early 2000s, North Carolina was a solid Democrat state. It is important to note the Democrat Party has changed dramatically over the last 20 or 30 years. These more blue dog Democrats, these more moderate Democrats that may be a little bit more liberal on social issues, but have a lot of strong conservative tendencies as it relates to things like personal responsibility and finances and that's what the Democrat Party or these blue dog Democrats had been in the past. And so for Jamie Agar, that is kind of the situation that you were seeing already unfold. And I'll note, this was all prior to this investigation becoming public. These national political groups had already started to shift this race to a toss-up prior to these allegations being announced. Now, we knew the report was going on. We knew that this House ethics investigation was happening. We didn't know what the details were going to be. We didn't have the full report. And there was, by the way, no guarantee that this thing was released before the election in November. So all of those factors leading up to a very interesting set of circumstances that we are going to watch unfold likely in just the next couple of days. And that's what's so fascinating about this, is the very short timeline. You talk about going from 0 to 100 in a situation. It doesn't get more textbook than this. Prior to Monday afternoon, while numbers were starting to change, maybe polls weren't looking so great here or there, you've gone from that to a complete implosion of a campaign and a total freaking disaster for the Republicans in the span of like 36 hours, 48 hours at the absolute max. It hasn't even been 48 hours since this report was released. It is a wild thing to watch. In rounding out our conversation on the big breaking political news early this morning, Congressman Chuck Edwards announcing that he is dropping out of the race in Western North Carolina, posting at 3:30 this morning on social media that he was going to remain in his seat through the remainder of his term. He will go down in the history books as a one-term member of Congress, announcing that he will serve the remainder of his term, but will not be seeking re-election coming up in November after a very damaging House Ethics Committee painted a very troubling picture moving forward for the congressman. The report walks right up to the line of as it relates to inappropriate conversations and inappropriate business with young female staffers within his congressional office. Important to note, the report makes it very clear that there is no evidence and no indication that Edwards had any sort of sexual relations or activities with these young female staffers. However, as we went through some of the details yesterday, he walked it right up to the line when you go through some of the details in the report, which included lavish gifts, including very expensive jewelry, handbags, complimenting the women consistently on their appearance and their looks, private, intimate, one-on-one dinners that he made sure were kept off his official calendar and schedule so that people wouldn't know what was going on, skipping votes in the United States House so that he could decorate a Christmas tree at one of his staffers' house. One of the text message exchanges include canceling a town hall that he was supposed to have so that he could go out to dinner with one of these young female staffers, walking it right up to the line of inappropriate sexual contact with members, young female staffers in his office. This has completely blown the lid off the 11th congressional race here in Western North Carolina, as now Republicans have to try and piece together a candidate and a campaign and fundraising and messaging and ads and all of this stuff that goes into running and winning a political campaign. They've got to piece all of this stuff together essentially in the next 30 to 45 days. That's the timeline. Early voting begins October the 15th. And so you can't just have everything ready to go by the 15th. You have to convince people before they head to the polls, which will obviously be before October the 15th, in the weeks leading up to that. You've got to convince them essentially starting as late as early October that you are the candidate, whether it's a male or female, you are the candidate that can win and should hold that position. This is a very, very compressed timeline, a major political scandal breaking here in North Carolina. I will admit, as we flipped the calendar over to 2026, and I was filling out my yearly bingo card of the things that were going to happen in the state of North Carolina, I will be the first to admit I did not have this House ethics report and Congressman Chuck Edwards abruptly dropping out of the race less than 3 months ahead of Election Day. I did not have that on my bingo card for the year. I don't think many other people did as well, as a major scramble is now taking place in Western North Carolina. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, this is not only a North Carolina story, and obviously Edwards, a member in Western North Carolina, so it is squarely in North Carolina where this is taking place. But let's talk about the national impact here for a second. We've talked in great detail here on the program about what these midterm elections are going to mean. What is going to go on later this year? Midterms, as you've heard me say ad nauseum, and I will continue to say it, typically do not favor the party in charge. We have seen this throughout history here, not only in North Carolina, but across the rest of the nation. The party that is in the minority, which is currently the Democrat Party, traditionally has a very good midterm cycle. And that's what you would expect heading into November, heading into later this year. Republicans, on the flip side, will try and do everything in their power to try and hold their majorities in the North Carolina General Assembly, in the United States Congress. Try and hold the majority in the U.S. Senate, which seems pretty likely. The things would have to go very, very poorly for the Republicans nationally, which could happen, but doesn't seem super likely. The bigger question, of course, is the United States House, right? We see this practically every 2 years flip who's in charge. We see the minority and majority flip pretty regularly, if not every 2 years, every 4 years. It is a constant back and forth battle. And so there was, and I guess in some aspects still remains, the possibility that Republicans hold on to the House by literally a single vote. Like you could have a one vote majority when everything is said and done, when all the dust settles after the night of November the 3rd, after Election Day. And so there was a real possibility of that. Elections are weird. Midterms are weird. When you look at this Chuck Edwards situation now, a seat that, as we just went through, was very clearly and should have been a very easy slam dunk win for Republicans based on all of the metrics, all of the data, all of the information we had available. You look at a race and a seat that didn't need a lot of work, should have been an easy shoo-in for Republicans out in Western North Carolina. That is now gone. And there is a very real possibility, and I would say it may even be likely at this point. I'm not trying to be a doom and gloom person, but I'm a relatively straight shooter when it comes to this stuff. This is going to be an incredible uphill battle for whoever the Republican candidate is that comes forward. If you put a gun to my head right now and said, Nick, tell me what's going to happen in Western North Carolina, my logical conclusion would be that it is going to be Democrat Jamie Agar who ends up representing Western North Carolina. Now, that's not to say that there's not a chance that a Republican candidate can win. It's still an area that tends to sway itself pretty red. It is a Republican area of the state, absolutely. But we've already seen the shifts beginning with Edwards in the position. And it's not like somebody has 6 months. If this had happened back in April or May, this would be a totally different discussion. The math would be completely different, but it's not April or May. Chuck Edwards announced he wasn't seeking re-election at 3:32 a.m. on Wednesday, August the 5th. Literally less than 3 months ahead of the election. That's as quickly as this thing has unfolded. So this is not only an important thing for North Carolina, but you would imagine that the national Democrats are salivating with what has happened here. And now Republicans are going to have to take resources from other important races and surge them into Western North Carolina. They are going to have to try and prop up whatever and whoever comes forward as the candidate, which we'll likely find out within the next couple of days. This is going to have to happen very quickly. They are going to have to surge money, surge resources, surge volunteers into Western North Carolina if they want to have any shot at retaining this seat for a Republican candidate. So it completely tips everything upside down, puts everything on its head. And I'll admit, from a political observer standpoint, from a political commentary standpoint, as somebody that does this day in and day out, it is going to be a fascinating process to watch. It is going to be a very interesting thing to see. It is not very often that you have things like this unfold so close to an election with an individual who is a sitting member of Congress, in which that is a Congressman Chuck Edwards. This is going to be a mess of a situation. Great comment coming in. This move was very selfish. Should have dropped out months ago. He knew he was in the wrong. I think that's a very valid and fair point. And I would imagine a lot of folks out in Western North Carolina that are going to have to try and scramble and figure out how do we pick up the pieces from this thing probably have some of those same thoughts, because all the information was in there. These things didn't just happen a couple of weeks ago. This investigation started back in May. Edwards knew what was in there, knew some of the things that were going to be released when the report came out, and chose not to do anything about it. So this is going to be a very fascinating political story to watch here across North Carolina. We'll keep you up to date with the most comprehensive coverage of that right here on the Nick Craig Show. Boy, what a morning. I'll say not very often. For those that don't know, I host the Carolina Journal News Hour, a product of the John Locke Foundation and their news publication, Carolina Journal. I host that at 5 o'clock in the morning live on WBT Radio in Charlotte. I will admit it is not very often that I wake up and have the ability to break news and kind of be the first one to talk about something publicly, but that is exactly what happened this morning as I was doing my show prep in the 4 o'clock hour. Thankfully, I was scrolling through Twitter and saw somebody repost the Chuck Edwards tweet. If not, I wouldn't have seen it. No news outlet or no news publication had run any details on it. Again, no surprise. He did it at 3:30 in the morning is when he posted on social media. Everybody, obviously, still any normal, sane, rational person still asleep. So a very busy morning here at the global headquarters of the Nick Craig Show, and we'll watch it throughout the day. Do not be surprised if by early afternoon there is not a couple of individuals that have thrown their hat into the race. The 11th Congressional District GOP Executive Committee will likely announce an emergency meeting within the coming days. We'll keep you up to date with the details right here on the Nick Craig Show. Well, that's going to do it for a very unexpected, jam-packed Wednesday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. You can visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app, and heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy your Wednesday. We'll do it again tomorrow morning, right here.